Hello students, today we are going to do an angel in disguise part 2. Joe saw by a quick intuition that his resolute bearing had impressed his wife and he answered quickly. Now Joe had an intuition that his resolute means purposeful, bearing means determined and posture had impressed his wife. So the way he was, looking at her, that had impressed his wife. She was impressed by the way he was speaking and standing there. And he answered quickly and with real indignation. Be that as it may, every woman at the funeral turned her eyes steadily from the sick child's face, and when the cart went off with her dead mother, hurried away and left her alone in that old hut and with the sun not an hour in the sky. Indignation means a feeling of anger. Now every woman who was present there, she turned her eyes away. She did not look at the sick child. Who's the sick child here? Maggie. And when the cart went off, what did they do? They just hurried away from there. They did not stop there to help her out, to help Maggie out. And so she was left alone in the old hut. And there was only 1 hour left for the sun to set. Where were John and Kate? Asked Mrs. Thomas. So she wanted to know where were the other 2 siblings of Maggie. Farmer Jones threw John into his wagon. So here Mr. Thompson informed Mrs. Thompson that Jones was tossed. Tossed here means thrown into the wagon by the farmer Jones, and he drove away. Katie went home with Mrs. Ellis, but nobody wanted the poor sick one. So he informed her that nobody wanted to take the sick one. Who's the sick one here? Maggie. Send her to the poorhouse was the cry. So everyone was saying that Maggie should be sent to the poorhouse because nobody wanted to take her home. Why didn't you let her go then? What did you bring her here for? So she's asking, why did you not let her go to the poorhouse? That means she wanted Maggie to go to the poorhouse and she did not want to help her at first. And she's asking him, what is the reason that you have brought her here for? She can't walk to the poorhouse, said Joe. Somebody's arm must carry her, and mine are strong enough for that task. So he informs her the reason he has got her here, because she cannot go on her own. So he is strong enough to take her to the poorhouse. Then Mrs. Thompson says, then why didn't you keep on? That means why did you stop? Why didn't you keep on going to the poorhouse? Why did you get her here? Why did you stop here? Demanded the wife. So she wanted an answer that why did you get her home? You should have taken her straight to the poorhouse. Because I'm not apt to go on fool's errand. Errands are short journey to do a job. So he's saying I'm not so foolish enough to go for a short journey just like that. The guardians must first be seen and a permit obtained. So he informed her first the guardians have to be seen and the permit has to be taken so that you can take the child to that poorhouse. There was no gainsaying this, means there was no denying this fact. It is actually a fact. You have to take the permission and only then you could send the child. When will you see the guardians? Was asked with irrepressible impatience. Now, irrepressible means not able to contain or control. So she was not able to control herself. She's asking him, when are you just going to take her from here? So Mr. Thompson answers that tomorrow I will be taking her. Why put it off till tomorrow? Go at once for the permit and get the whole thing off your hands tonight. So she can't wait for that time that much long also. She says, you can get it done tonight itself. Go right now and get it done. And send her to the poorhouse. Jane set the wheel right with an impressiveness of tone. So he was trying to impress her because he wanted her to listen to him. So the tone that he is using here is to impress his wife. That greatly subdued his wife. I read in the Bible sometimes and find much said about little children. So he says, I've read in the Bible about little children. How the Savior rebuked the disciples who would not receive him. So he informed her. Now, even God did not like such people, his disciples, who actually rebuked, did not take care of the children. How he took them in his arms and blessed them, and how he said that whosoever gave them even a cup of cold water should not go unrewarded. So that is what was told by God, that he would bless them, and whoever gave them even a cup of water, they will not go unrewarded. They will definitely be blessed by God. So Joe Thompson, he adds, now it is a small thing for us to keep this poor motherless little one for a single night. So he says that it is a small thing that we can do, keeping her for one single night. She's a poor motherless little one. To be kind to her for a single night. So he's saying we can be kind to her for just one night. To make her feel comfortable for a single night. He's saying just for let me make her feel comfortable just for one night. The voice of the strong, rough man shook. Who's the strong, rough man? Mr. Thompson. And he turned his head away. He looked to the other side, so that the moisture in his eyes might not be seen. And what was that moisture? That was tears coming out of his eyes. And he just looked the other side so that Mrs. Thompson doesn't look at his tears, doesn't see his tears. This is one of the misconceptions that men are not supposed to cry. So they don't show, even if they cry, they don't, tend to show their tears to others. So Mrs. Thompson did not answer, but a soft feeling crept into her heart. So she understood how emotional her husband was at this point of time. So even she became a little soft hearted. Feelings crept into her heart. Look at her kindly, Jane. Speak to her kindly. So that was a kind of request he's trying to make to his wife. Think of a dead mother and the loneliness, the pain, the sorrow that must be on all her coming life. So he's trying to make her understand that what kind of loneliness and the pain that little child is going to go through just because she has lost her mother. Not just now, but all her life through. The softness of his heart gave unwonted eloquence to his lips. Unwanted here means unusual, and eloquence means fluent and persuasive. Now, why there was so much of persuasiveness on his lips? Why was he trying to express that way? Because there was, a soft corner for her. In his heart, there was a soft corner for Maggie that he was trying to express through his mouth. Mrs. Thompson did not reply, but presently turned towards the little chamber where her husband had deposited her. Deposited her is he had made her to lie down. So she just turned towards that little chamber. And pushing open the door, went quietly in. So she just opened the door and she went inside. Joe did not follow. He did not go behind her. He did not want to see what she was doing. He saw that her state has changed. Now the reason he didn't follow her, because he understood that his wife has changed now, and felt that it would be best to leave her alone with the child. So he thought it is better that they be left alone. So he went to his shop. So he decided that he should be going to the shop, leaving them alone, which stood near the house, which was just near the house, and worked until dusky evening. So he worked until it was evening, released him from the labor, and so that's the time to close down the shop and go back home. A little shining through the little chamber windows was the first object that attracted Joe's attention on returning towards the house. So while he was returning home, he saw that there was something shining through the window where Maggie was sleeping. It was a good omen, so he thought this it is a good sign that there is something going on in that room. The path led him to the windows. So the path that he came, that is outside the windows, okay, and he came there and he stood there. When opposite, he could not help pausing to look in. So when he was opposite to the window where Maggie was there in that room, he could not help but he felt like looking inside that what is going on. It was dark now enough outside to screen him from observation. So it was so dark outside that people who were inside could not see who is standing outside and trying to look inside. So let's see, what did he see inside? Maggie lay a little raised on the pillow with the lamp shining full on her face, upon her face. So he saw Maggie and she was, lying there with the pillow was raised and the lamp was shining on her face. Mrs. Thompson was sitting by the bed, and who was sitting right next to her? It was Mrs. Thompson, talking to the child. What she was doing? She was talking to Maggie, but her back was towards the window so that her countenance was not seen. Since her back was towards the window and like he could not look at her facial expressions. From Maggie's face, therefore, Joe must read the character of their intercourse. So now, since he could not look at his wife's expression, his wife's face, so he looked at Maggie's face and he tried to interpret what was going on between them. He saw that her eyes were intently fixed upon his wife. So she was continuously looking at Mrs. Thompson. That now and then a few words came, and now and then she was speaking a few words, as if in answers from her lips. Like she was trying, it looked like she was trying to give some answers to Mrs. Thompson. That her expression was sad and tender, and while she was speaking, she was sad, but very softly she was speaking. But he saw nothing of bitterness or pain. But he could find out that there was no bitterness on her face and there was no pain. A deep drawn breath was followed by one of relief. So now he took a deep breath. He was relieved. Who? That is Mr. Thompson. He was relieved that they both are getting along well. As a weight lifted itself from his heart, and what was that weight? He wanted them to get along well. He thought that they would not get along well. On entering, Joe did not go immediately to the little chamber. So as soon he seen them talking to each other, and he saw that they both were comfortable talking to each other. So he did not go to the little chamber where Mrs. Thompson and Maggie was talking to each other, having a conversation. So his heavy tread means walk, about the kitchen brought his wife somewhat hurriedly from the room where she had been with Maggie. So the way he was walking heavily, she could hear the, like those steps she could hear. And so she hurriedly came from the room where she was sitting with Maggie. Joe thought it best not to refer to the child, not to manifest any concern in regard to her. Manifest means show clearly. So at this point of time, Mr. Thompson or Joe thought that it is best not to talk about the child or show any concern. How soon will supper be ready? So he just asked one thing, and that was about supper. Right soon, answered Mrs. Thompson, beginning to bustle about. She's trying to run here and there because she has to get dinner ready. There was no asperity in her voice. Asperity means roughness. So she was speaking very in a soft tone. After washing from his hands and face the dust and soil of work, Joe left the kitchen. So he just washed his hands and face and he left the kitchen and went to the little bedroom. Now, where did he go? He went to see Maggie. A pair of large bright eyes looked up at him. So Maggie had large bright eyes and she looked at him. Him is Mr. Thompson from the snowy bed. Why it is called snowy? Because the covers, the bed sheet, everything was white in color. Looked at him tenderly, gratefully, and pleadingly. Tenderly, because he was taking care of her. Grateful, she was very grateful that he had brought her here. And pleadingly, requestingly, that please don't let me go away from here. Let me be here. How his heart swelled in his bosom. Bosom is the chest. So, his heart swelled. He was feeling very good about what he has done. He was very happy. With what a quicker motion came the heartbeats, and his heart was beating very fast. He was feeling very happy about what he has done. Joe sat down and now for the first time examining the thin frame carefully. So he just sat down next to Maggie and he was, for the first time, he was looking at her, examining the thin frame of the face carefully under the lamp light, saw that it was an attractive face. So he looked at her properly and saw that the child, that this Maggie, was very attractive and full of childish sweetness. So she has that childish look on her. It was very sweet. Childish sweetness which suffering had not been able to obliterate. Obliterate means destroy. So the sufferings that was brought by her being poor and not getting enough care, even that did not make her, that childish sweetness go away from her face. She had an innocence look on her face. What name? Your name is Maggie, he said as he sat down and took her soft little hand in his. So he just asked her, your name is Maggie. Yes, sir. Her voice struck a chord that quivered in a low strain of music. So when she said, yes, sir, it was like, music to his ears. Have you been sick long? So another question comes. Yes, sir. What a sweet patience was in her tone. So she was not like other children, who shout or who jump around, She was very quiet and she had a sweet patience in her tone. Now, patience, why? Because she was very poor, and that being poor had, for everything they had to have patience. That has brought patience in her tone. Has the doctor been to see you? So he asked about, have you seen the doctor? He used to come but not lately. No, sir. Have you any pain? Sometimes but not now. So there is a conversation going on between them. He's asking her questions now. When had you pain? This morning my side ached and my back hurt when you carried me. So she informed him that if even somebody carries her, it pains for her. It hurts you to be lifted or moved about? Yes, sir. Your side doesn't ache now? No, sir. Does it ache a great deal? Yes, sir, but it hasn't ached any since I have been on this soft bed. So she was telling him that this soft bed has done good for her. The soft bed feels good, so he asked her, does it feel good? Oh, yes, sir, so good. So she replies that definitely it does feel good for her. What a satisfaction mingled with gratitude was in her voice. And the way she was saying it, the tone that she was using, there In that tone, there was satisfaction and there was gratitude. She was thankful for what she has got. Supper is ready, said Mrs. Thompson, looking into the room a little while afterwards. So, afterwards, Mrs. Thompson came and she announced that supper was ready. Joe glanced from his wife's face to that of Maggie. So Mr. Thompson was looking at his wife and then he looked at Maggie. She understood him and answered. So that look was for what about Maggie? When is she going to eat? She can wait until we are done and then I will bring her something to eat. So she informs that definitely I will give her, but let us first have supper and then I will bring her something to eat. There was an effort at indifference on the part of Mrs. Thompson, but her husband had seen her through the window. Now Mrs. Thompson was trying to be a different person altogether, but Mr. Thompson understood that it was something different that she was trying to put on an act. Why? Because he had seen her through the window. She was being nice to Maggie and understood that coldness was assumed. She was putting on a fake act, that she did not care for Maggie. Joe waited after sitting down to the table for his wife to introduce the subject uppermost in both of their thoughts. So now they're sitting at the dining table and he's waiting for Mrs. Thompson to bring up the subject about which they both wanted to talk about. But she kept silent on that theme. She did not say, Mrs. Thompson did not say anything. For many minutes, he maintained a like reserve. Even he maintained the like reserve means even he kept quiet. At last she said abruptly, now she could not hold it within. So she just all of a sudden she came out with something. What are you going to do with that child? So the question she asked him was, what are you going to do? I thought you understood me that she was to go to the poorhouse, replied Joe, as if surprised at her question. So he was quite surprised. He was trying to show because he had already told Mrs. Thompson that he would be taking her to the poorhouse the next day. Mrs. Thompson looked rather strangely at her husband for sonic moments. Sonic moments, a few moments, she just looked at him. What is he trying to do? And then dropped her eyes. She just put down her eyes. The subject was not again referred to during the meal. So while they were having the meals, they did not discuss about Maggie again. At its close, Mrs. Thompson toasted a slice of bread and softened it with milk and butter. Adding to this a cup of tea, she took them in to Maggie. So this is what all she took for Maggie to eat. And held the small waiter. Waiter is on which we carry food. Okay. On which she had placed them. So she had placed all this on the waiter and she took it to Maggie. While the hungry child ate with every sign of pleasure. So while she was consuming it, there was pleasure on her face. She was very happy and she was very thankful for having it. It is good. Is it good? Asked Mrs. Thompson, seeing with what a keen relish the food was taken. So she could see that Maggie is really relishing, really enjoying the food that she's eating. So she asked the question, is it good what you're eating? The child paused with the cup in her hand and answered with a look of gratitude that awoke a new life, old human feelings which had been slumbering in her heart for half a score of years. Now, the child paused, she paused there, she had a cup in her hand, and the look she had on her face was that she's really thankful for what she has got. And that look that she had on her face, that evoked feelings in Mrs. Thompson's heart that had been slumbering. Slumbering means sleeping in her heart for half a score of years. So for many years, those feelings were somewhat hidden somewhere inside. And because of the look, the way Maggie looked at her, those feelings came out. Actually, she was a nice person, but for some reason it was kept inside. We will keep her a day or two longer. She's so weak and helpless, said Mrs. Joe Thompson. So, what did Mrs. Thompson say? That we will keep her for 1 or 2 more days. Why? Because she's very weak and she's very helpless. So, you see the change in Mrs. Thompson? This is the same Mrs. Thompson that when Mr. Thompson had come with her, with Maggie in his arms, she stopped him at the threshold of the house and she did not let him enter. She stopped him and she questioned him there. And this is the same person who's asking for Maggie to be, she can stay with them for 1 or 2 days so that she can take care of her. So definitely there is a change in Mrs. Thompson, said Mrs. Joe Thompson in answer to her husband's remark at breakfast time on the next morning that he must step down and see the guardians of the poor about Maggie. So he says, I have to go. Next morning, he informs, I have to go and meet the guardians at the poorhouse. She will be so much in your way, said Joe. So Joe is telling her that she will be troublesome and you will not be able to do your work because you have to help her also. I shan't mind that for a day or two. Poor thing. She says, it's all right. I can take care of it. Day or two, it does not matter. So she's, slowly getting attached to that girl. That is Maggie. Joe did not see the guardians of the poor on that day, on the next day, nor the day following. So he did not go to see. He did not go to see the guardians of the poorhouse. In fact, he never saw them at all on Maggie's account. So he never went there, and he never went there to admit Maggie there. For in less than a week, Mrs. Joe Thompson would as soon leave thought of taking up her own abode in the almshouse as sending Maggie there. So, within a week, things had changed. Maggie has changed Mrs. Thompson, that she would, not think of leaving Maggie there, as she would not think of going to an almshouse. Now, what is an almshouse? A house owned by a charity. So she would not think of going there, and nor would think of sending Maggie there. What light and blessing did that sick and helpless child bring to the home of Joe Thompson? So that child she's come there with a blessing, and she had spread light, happiness all around. The poor wheelwright. It had been dark and cold and miserable there for a long time, just because his wife had nothing to love and care for out of herself. So she, the way they were living for so long, it was very miserable. It was very dark, coldness. Now, the reason for this miserable life was there was nothing, that she could take care of anyone. She could love anyone there. And so became sore, irritable, ill tempered, and self afflicting. And due to all this, she had become very sore and she was irritable. She used to get irritated at small little things. She had become very ill tempered and self afflicted. It means causing an injury to yourself. In the desolation of her woman's nature. So because of this, she had brought, pain to herself, and a woman's nature, how it is usually, that had changed. She had become a person who does not care. Now, the sweetness of that sick child, looking ever to her in love, patience, and gratitude, was as honey to her soul. Now, just because there was a child there who was very sweet, though she was sick, but she was sweet. Now, ever looking to her in love and looking to her with love, and she had patience and she was always thankful. It was actually like, honey to her soul. It gave sweetness to her soul. and she carried her in her heart as well as in her arms. Since she could not go all alone anywhere, so she had to be carried in her arms, but at the same time, she was there in her heart. She started caring for her, she started loving her. A precious burden. Now, children, this a precious burden is an oxymoron because two different words of different characters have been used here. Precious is a positive word and burden is a negative word. So, when two words of different nature are brought together, that is called an oxymoron. It is a literary device used here. Now, now, Maggie is called a precious burden. Precious because they really started loving her, and a burden because she had to be, taken around. She could not do anything on her own. But it was a precious one. As for Joe Thompson, there was not a man in all neighborhood who drank daily of a precious, more precious wine of life than he. So, why do people drink? They drink to get that intoxication, to forget all the worries. That is what exactly life was doing to Mr. Thompson, that is Joe Thompson. It was giving intoxication to him because he was very happy and he was forgetting all the bad times that he had had in the past. An angel had come into his house disguised as a sick, helpless, and miserable child. So, this miserable and sick child, she was disguised as an angel and filled all its dreary chambers with the sunshine of love, and filled all the dreary means dull chambers with the sunshine of her love. The story tells us that people can change and can get emotionally attached to others. It depicts love, kindness, and human feelings. This story gives us a message to help other people. We should be kind, sympathetic, and soft hearted. Hope you have understood. Subscribe to my channel for the latest updates.